Hi, my name is Marcia Stromgren, and you've tuned in to Just the Facts. I have in the studio today as my guest Chad Walsh, who's running for the Sheriff's Office in St. Louis County. It's good to have you with us, Chad.
Well, thank you for having me.
So, would you like to tell our audience a little bit about yourself and why you are running for the Sheriff's Office?
Would love to. My name is Chad Walsh. I'll be running for St. Louis County Sheriff in 2022. The reason why, let me give you a little background about myself. I'm a northern Minnesota native, born and raised up here. I'm a disabled veteran. I'm a law enforcement officer. I'm an entrepreneur, but most importantly, I'm a family man. Family is number one to me. So I get the other question is, why are you running for St. Louis County Sheriff? That is a huge question. One of the main reasons why I'm running for St. Louis County Sheriff is we need to have a new generation of law enforcement. Somebody that believes in the Constitution, somebody that believes in the Sheriff's Department belongs to the people, and wants to get the people involved in what we do as law enforcement. That is very important. That is one of the main reasons, and not one person can do this. We have to get everybody involved and do it as a collective group.
What do you mean by getting everybody involved? I know what you're talking about, the Sheriff's Office belongs to the people, but I wonder if anybody else really understands that.
A lot of people don't understand. The sheriff is elected by the people. The sheriff is the chief law enforcement officer for the county. The sheriff is the only politician, and I'm going to say it like that because it's an elected position, and I've had this talk that the sheriff is not a politician, that it's a nonpartisan position. The sheriff represents everybody. The sheriff is the only position that has the power to arrest. Elected official that has the power to arrest. Now, when we talk about the Sheriff's Department belonging to the people, the people vote for the sheriff. The sheriff is supposed to represent the folks that vote for him. And when I talk about getting people involved, I talk about getting the communities in St. Louis County involved in how we do law enforcement. Law enforcement should conduct business in each community as the community wants them to conduct business in there.
Do you feel that the current sheriff, Littman, is not doing that?
I'm not going to comment much on Mr. Littman today.
Okay.
Mr. Littman, he has run the Sheriff's Department for several years. But I don't feel as a citizen, because that's what I am, as a citizen of St. Louis County, I don't feel that I ever get asked to be part of how they do business. And that's important.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard it stated that way from anybody. And yes, we do go elect our sheriff, but we also elect other officials, and they aren't really answering to the people either. So I'm just curious to know, how could you change things then? What would be the way that you would improve the relationship between the voters and your department should you be elected?
That's an awesome question, and I get that at least once a day. How can we do this? Well, first off, I personally, one person, can't change anything. It takes a collective soul, a collective group to change something. How do we start with that? Well, first off, we'll start with scheduled meetings throughout St. Louis County and introduce the St. Louis County Sheriff's Department, the local law enforcement, to their communities. If you asked a citizen out in the county, who's your deputy patrolling today? You know what they would say? I don't know.
I don't know, yeah.
Do you think they should know that person? They should. They should know who's out there. They're going to put their trust in that person if they get into a bad situation, and you're going to get somebody showing up at your house that you don't know. So I feel it's very important that we start out with scheduled meetings. Let's get to know our law enforcement locally. From there, there's all kinds of avenues that we can take.
Well, I know that you are a officer of the law in Moose Lake.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you know, do the people, the residents in that area know who you are?
They sure do.
How have you gone about getting introduced to your constituents down there?
When I work in Moose Lake, I spend a lot of time outside of the patrol car. The patrol car's a vessel to get around, but you also need to go meet all the businesses. You need to let them know that who you are, and if they have a problem, and be out in the community. When you see people walking, it doesn't hurt to stop and talk. And the community, they like that. They want that interaction with their law enforcement. They don't just want you to drive by and wave and never talk to you. I get, even when in the summertime it's extremely busy and we have a lot of folks that come from out of the area to Moose Lake to camp, I spend a lot of time meeting a lot of folks, and it's great. They want to know the local law enforcement.
Huh. Do you have more than one officer in the Moose Lake area? So you have more, are you the chief officer, or how does that work down there?
So Moose Lake Police Department has several officers, but only one officer on duty at a time.
Oh.
So you are it. If you have a problem, you're gonna solve the problem. Your backup might be 15, 20 minutes away. You will learn how to communicate with the community. You will learn who the community is. That's very, very important, because there are some people that law enforcement hasn't always had that great relationship with. You need to know that, and you need to know that before you get involved. And you should introduce yourself to those folks and try to change that relationship with those folks.
I think today we have big media making law enforcement's job, position, anti. And so there's that stigma now against the police department.
Yes.
Where I don't ever remember experiencing that in my younger years, or even I think more just the last few years, maybe 3 to 5 at the most, that stigma against the police department I would think that's overwhelming for you to have to deal with. Perhaps in a small area like Moose Lake, you don't have that kind of a problem like you would have, say, in the rest of St. Louis County, or even in the Duluth area. What do you think about that issue?
You are correct. The big media has portrayed law enforcement as to be bad. Let's just say it what it is.
Bullies.
Bullies, correct. And I'm going to say this. How do we change that? How do we counteract that? It's very simple. Us as law enforcement, we get out in the communities, we have these meetings, we open up the doors in law enforcement and we say, come help us. Ask all the communities, how do you want us to police in your community? That is very important. Once you start opening those doors and those lines of communication, you start breaking down the barriers between law enforcement and the public, which have been there for years. You start breaking them down, and you invite the community into how you do business, and they know that they can have a say. Guess what? It doesn't matter what big media says now, because you have the backing of the communities, and they're going to stand up for you. So your media can say anything they want. And yes, in every career field, you do have, let's just put it, certain folks that aren't representing that career field. You do have that.
Oh, yes.
I'm not going to deny that.
That's true.
But with that being said, you have a lot of folks that love their job and love to help the citizens. And there's a ways to deal with the folks that don't want to help the citizens or follow what should be followed. And the other ones, the ones that are doing the good job, they don't want the few to give everybody a bad name.
I think you would say that for just about any type of, as a business owner myself, I run my business with the best principles, best practices to make us look to the public like they want to come and use what we offer.
Right.
It should be the same way with every level of government. Should
Correct.
be people friendly and not divisional, which you see going on today. We're pitting people against each other. Doesn't matter skin color. It's overall people against each other, and a lot of that is greed and selfishness.
It is,
And it figures into the type of job that you have to do.
Correct. And law enforcement is a customer service orientated field. The public is our customers. And as I tell my employees, this is true, I treat my employees very, very well. Happy employees make happy customers. There's no way to change that. If you have happy employees, they're happy to be there, they're happy to be helping the folks that walk through the door, that customer is going to leave with a smile. And they're going to know that they're important, which they are. Everybody, you know this, you're a business owner, everybody that walks through that door is important. As I tell folks, I just have a building without the people coming there. And I'm a business owner myself. Without the citizens, there's no need for law enforcement. So us as law enforcement need to recognize that every person out there is our customer. Now I do understand there are some bad customers, as in they want to do bad things, and there's ways to handle that situation.
Without being antagonistic and angry towards them.
Definitely.
You have to show them, you have to learn how to deflate.
A little bit of compassion goes a long, long
Right.
ways.
Right.
You know, and I'm going to tell you, I started law enforcement, and I graduated high school, and I started law enforcement right away after graduating high school in the U.S. Army, and I've learned a lot. You know, talking to people and showing a little compassion goes a long, long ways. You don't need to be mean to the citizens. You don't need to treat them any different. Because without them, there's really no job for you.
When you first started law enforcement, how many years ago?
1994. Many, many years ago.
Yes, you've seen a lot. Things have changed a lot since then.
I'm glad you said that. Society has changed, but the way we do business as law enforcement hasn't changed, and it needs to. Technology has changed, don't get me wrong. I mean, when I started, we didn't have computers in the cars. We didn't have all that fancy stuff in the cars. When I first started, we didn't even have cages in the cars. The barrier between, oh yes,
Really?
yes. But technology has changed. The tools we use have changed. But some of the methods and the way that law enforcement treats folks has not changed. And that needs to change.
Would you want to expand on that a little bit?
I can, a little bit. I use this, and this is a true analogy, that 97% of the people that law enforcement comes in contact with every day are law-abiding citizens. The other 3% are the bad actors, right?
Okay.
So you need to be able to separate the fact that, so I stopped this individual for speeding, I don't need to treat them like they're going to kill me.
Like a criminal.
Correct. That law-abiding citizen might only have that one contact with law enforcement their whole life, and you don't get to come back and give a first impression. You can never get a second chance on a first impression. So if you walk up there with the attitude that you're better than that person because you're wearing the uniform, that's the wrong attitude to have. Society, and I'm going to say this, and this is true, society has gone from we are a society of records, right? You know, the whole point of stopping somebody for speeding is you want to change behavior, to slow them down so we don't have more traffic accidents. Maybe not giving them a citation and just talking to them as a person, not giving them a scolding, because that's not your job, but talking to them as a person, that goes a long, long way versus writing the piece of paper.
I'm going to affirm that. I'm going to go back to something that happened. My friend and I were coming from the symphony, and we were headed west on Arrowhead Road, and that's like, it's 30 in there?
It is, it's
yeah,
30.
It's 30. And we were busy talking, and you know, when my friend and I get to talking, I get driving and I'm not really concentrating on my speed. So all of a sudden there's the red lights.
It happens.
In the back window. And I immediately pulled over, and I was nervous and got out the driver's license and everything, and the officer came up and he said, "Do you realize you were going almost 40? And I said, "No, sir, I did not." And he said, "Well, you were. And so why are you out tonight?" And I said, "Oh, we're just coming from the symphony, and so we're heading home." And he says, "Well, I'm not even going to give you a citation, but I'm warning you right now. The next time I see you, you're going to get a ticket." And I just breathed this big, heavy sigh of relief, and I thought, that was very considerate of him. That was very, I hadn't had any traffic violations for a few years. I tend to have a lead foot. So I hadn't had any for several years. And I just felt, wow, what a nice officer he was. He was, just like you're saying,
We need more of that.
97, did you say 97% of the people?
97% of the people that we deal with are law-abiding citizens.
Yeah, wow.
That's a good percentage, isn't it?
It is, yeah, that's amazing to me.
It is. You know, and with that being said, you know, we do deal with the other 3%. And I talk about when we have contact with the other 3%, there are so many tools out there that we can use. And I talk less than lethal stuff that are at law enforcement's disposal that we should be using. Lots of that stuff. There's a ton of that out there. And I believe that we should be exploring all of those avenues when it comes to dealing with any of the bad actors.
The friend that I was in the car with, her son just finished training to be a law enforcement officer. He really wants to get into the DNR.
Yep.
But I'm not sure if he'll make it there. But he has been out in police cars on many different, getting trained. I suppose you might say that's a training period, perhaps.
It is, yes.
It is. So he sees firsthand. I haven't talked to him lately, but I know that he's been doing this now for several months. So how long do they train with a seasoned officer like yourself? How long do they have to be in training before they're actually put out there?
When I started in 1994, when I joined the U.S. Army, we spent a good, you know, you got 5 months of the academy, and then you could have 2-3 months of field training. When I went to South Dakota, you have 4 months of the academy, and we had another 16 weeks of field training before we were ever on our own after that. So it's a huge amount of time before the officer ever actually makes it to riding by themselves in the car and making those decisions on his own or her own or his own. The training is good. I'm going to say that we as officers, you know, I get back to that 97%. You know, we deal with a lot of law-abiding citizens, and I want every experience, because like I say, it might be the first experience and the last experience they ever have with law enforcement, and we want them to know that we are not what the news makes us out to be. Not at all. We're citizens just like you folks. We live in the community, and it's very important that the community knows that. You know?
So when you came out of the service, you were a trained police officer.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, I was. And I got hired in South Dakota, went through the academy, spent some time out there as a law enforcement officer. You know, South Dakota, I worked in a very small community, and I learned really fast from the older officers that you need the community. You need them on your side. They might have to help you someday. So just remember that when you're out and about. Treat the community as you'd want to be treated. And that's very, very important. You know, when it comes down to law enforcement and the public, I believe that the public should see exactly what we go through daily. Whether it's the slow times when you're just driving around in the car, to we're going to a domestic, we're going to a shooting call, we're going to this, we're going to that. The public should have an opportunity to see what is happening in their communities and know that this is what the officers in our community are dealing with on a daily basis or on a regular basis. You know, how can we help curb that? How can we help both the police department prevent some of that? And that's all about getting the public involved and opening the doors and inviting them in. That's very important.
That might be an interesting project to take on with somebody, force somebody with a camera to ride along, but wouldn't that be potentially dangerous to do something like that?
It is dangerous, but does the public need to know? They do. They do. It's not confidential. You should know what's going on in your community. And if you don't, you should ask your local law enforcement, when are we going to have these meetings? When are you going to tell me what happens in my community each month? Instead of doing it once a year.
Or even that?
Or even that.
I don't recall having an invitation, announcement from the sheriff's department, because see, I live in a township. We don't have police out there. Mm-hmm. We have sheriff deputies. I have had good experiences with my business on the Rice Lake Road. We are now going to gate it. Right. We haven't had to since we bought it in 2007, but I think that there is more opportunity for theft and more criminals moving into our area, so we feel this is a good time to do that. But they used to sit, the sheriffs used to sit in our lot and oversee what was going on next door, because it's not well lit like our business is, and there were a lot of thefts over there. And they would sit in our parking lot, and I come there sometimes, and there's the sheriff's car. So I felt very safe. Right. They were there.
That's a great feeling, to feel safe, isn't it? You know, the other thing I'll talk a little bit about myself. Yes, I do have a law enforcement background, but I have a very diverse background. I'm also a business owner like you.
Well, tell us something about your business.
So me and my wife and I, we own two businesses. We own a portable restroom company and septic company, which employs 5 full-time union personnel, Teamsters. Then we also own an indoor training facility / shooting range, which we have a retail area, we have an indoor shooting range, and we do training there to train people how to responsibly own firearms. So there's 2 businesses that we own. So I'm not coming to this position with 25 years in the same job and no outside perspective. I bring a huge citizen, business owner, law enforcement officer perspective to the job. Totally different than somebody that's been there 25 years and saying, this is how we've always did it.
Well, and you know something interesting, and I can relate because we are business owners. Every person is different. There's no same mold.
No.
And when you are dealing with a prospective customer, after a while you kind of get a feel of how to deal with it, that personality. You don't have a cut.
No.
Form.
No.
So that also helps you, I'm sure, in your work, because you're recognizing the different temperaments, the way people are, and some people are gruff and some people are soft and easy to deal with, and other ones are just kind of corrosive from the beginning.
Yes.
But it's also a challenge. To me, it's a challenge to learn how to deal with these people and get their respect. Like you said, as a law enforcement officer, you do that as a business owner as well.
You do. And when we talk about customers, they came to your business. As I tell my employees, they took the time out of their day to drive up here. We're going to take the time to make sure that we answer all of their questions and treat them with 100% respect and compassion on what they're trying to look forward to. That is very important. And I truly believe, and some people might disagree with me, that before you ever become a law enforcement officer, you should have some form of customer service background. That is extremely important, because law enforcement, back to that 3%, the 3% is arresting the bad guys, or the situations that are bad. But that other 97% of the folks you deal with, they're all customers. And they want to be treated with that compassion. And they want to know that when you walk up to the car that, who am I getting today? Am I getting the nice officer? Or am I getting the guy that's been doing this for 25 years and doesn't care?
I might have had a bad day in the office or whatever, and comes up to you treating you like that.
Right.
Because there again, it's that don't go at your customers, your base, your tax-paying citizen who elected you. Go at them with your problems either, or your anxieties. You've got to put that behind you.
Put that behind you,
and,
yes.
And give them, so that you get from them the same kind of treatment you want. What you want to give them is what you hope they're going to give back to you.
Correct.
Which will deflate an anxiety moment, like my ticket. I mean, I realized was speeding, or he wouldn't have pulled me over. I didn't go get haughty with him, and he was
right.
Nice with me. He didn't give me a ticket. He just warned me that the next time you will get a ticket.
But but even with that being said, let's say you did get upset with the officer, which most people do because they're nervous. They got stopped by law enforcement, and that might not be their first time that they've had a run-in with law enforcement, or they've been stopped, and the last time they were stopped, the contact didn't go very well. Can you change that? You can. You can change somebody's perspective on the way we do business by treating them well. You surely can. That's a huge, huge deal. So you have this person that, last time I got stopped, the person that walked up to the car was nothing but mean to me. Can we change that? We can. We can change that. The other thing is, you talk about being out in the country, in your community. If you knew your deputies that were on patrol, if you did get stopped, the exchange is going to be different, isn't it? It's not going to be, I don't know this person, but I've talked to this deputy several times. I've talked to this law enforcement officer several times at the functions. So I know how that person is when they're walking up to the car. See how we're eliminating that us and them factor. But just by opening them doors of communication between law enforcement and the public, we're going to eliminate a lot of that, I don't know who I'm getting today.
Well, it makes me think as we're talking, as I do know that we have a deputy that lives in our community.
Awesome.
I believe it's a woman, but I'm not sure. We have an annual meeting, as most townships do, in March, every single year. Might be nice if the sheriffs in those townships stopped in to vote and to introduce themselves, because that annual meeting would be a perfect opportunity to get to know your neighbor sheriff.
So I've been talking all over St. Louis County, and I had this talk with several fire departments, volunteer fire departments. They're like, Chad, we don't see the deputies. I said, has the sheriff or any deputy been to any one of your meetings and asked you How can we improve the relationship between the fire department and the sheriff's department?
So this is one of the ways you could implement that should you be
That's just
elected.
one way.
Yeah.
One way. There are so many other ways, and I'm not just talking about the social media way. We all know it's that way, right? We get that. That's out there. We'll use that. But how about
But social media is so impersonal.
It is so
And that's
impersonal.
the thing
Yes.
that we're talking about. There's an impersonality, impersonal action that is not taking up. Okay, start again. We have become so impersonal.
We have, yes.
We turn to electronics to make communications. It's not the same as interaction like you and I are having today.
Not at all.
And that's where you're saying it needs to go.
It needs to go to be more personal.
Yep.
You need to meet the person behind the uniform. That person is a citizen of your community too. And they need to meet you. And they need to understand, okay, you know, I when I walk up to the car or when I get called to your residence, I know who I'm getting today because I've talked to you 4 or 5 times, whether it be at a local meeting or it be I met you in the gas station, I talked to you at the store. You see where I'm going with that?
Yep.
We got to get away from that authority figure. Don't get me wrong, we all know it's there, right?
Yeah.
We need the personality behind it. It's not just a job. If you decide to become a law enforcement officer, you're deciding to do it because A, I want to help the public. They're going to call you when they're at their worst times, right? They are. And they're calling you because you're the professional. You're the one they're asking for help from. They need to know who you are. And you need to know who they are. That's a big deal.
I agree, and
And-
I think
and-
that there's a way to start it, like we said, is, you know, maybe call the sheriff's office and say, why don't you suggest to your deputies that live in a particular community that they go meet the people at the annual meeting. Now, granted, there's not very many people at these annual meetings.
No, there's not.
But maybe if they knew someone from the community, like the sheriff's officer, was going to be there to greet them and say hello, that perhaps maybe a few more would show up. But it's
A lot more
it's
would
a
show
start.
up.
It's
But
a start.
you know what? And I'm going to say this. That starts at the top.
Exactly.
It all starts at the very top. The person that is elected by the people to run that department should open those doors and lines of communication and say, folks, we're going to be at your meeting, or we're going to have a meeting at your town hall or at your fire department, and we're going to do this several times a year. And eventually, guess what? It'll come around for full circle, and you will know all the citizens of the community, even the new ones that are moving in, because they're going to talk to their neighbors. And their neighbors are going to say, yep, we have a thing down at the volunteer fire department, you know, twice a year. The sheriff's department comes, the ambulance comes, everybody comes. It's great. And by the way, we got kids. Kids love that stuff. They love to talk to law enforcement. You know, it's different for my children because their dad's a law enforcement officer. It's like talking to dad, you know.
Yeah.
But they always say to me, Dad, look, there's a police car. Yeah, there is, you know. Or look, there's the ambulance, or there's the fire truck. You know, they want to see that. They want to go meet those people. To them are heroes. Them are professionals.
And that's a good time to do it when they're young, before they get the wrong impression.
Correct.
Down the road a little bit, which unfortunately is even happening in the school systems today, because you have bad attitudes coming from the children that have gotten and picked up those bad habits from the school. So
Well,
it needs
yeah,
to be
yeah,
a
but-
better contact all overall, not just in one or two little areas. It has to come overall. Presentations in schools, are you allowed to get into schools
We sure
today?
are. And you know, I truly believe, and I say this, I have a kindergartner. I have a 4th grader. We have a 10th grader. We have some children, me and my wife, and they're great. I love my family to death. You know, family is number one. I asked them, would you like your dad to come talk in class? You know, well, yeah. Everybody wants to talk to law enforcement, right? They do. Because, well, even adults do, because they all got questions. Everybody has a question about the law. They do. And I spend a lot of time, I speak all over St. Louis County, and I spend a lot of time answering people's questions. They're like, Chad, what happens in this situation? Or what happens in that situation? But when we get back to schools, we can really mold a child, because they're so impressionable, into law enforcement is...
That's what school is all about.
Right. Law
Good or
enforcement
bad.
is not what the media or social media says it is.
Right.
I know my deputy, I know my police officers in my community, and they treat me great. And they're there to help me when I need help. And that's, you know, when I talk about getting involved in the public, and I truly believe this, law enforcement shows up at your situation, you called them. They might say, you know what, ma'am, this is not a law enforcement issue, but hold on. I'll point you in the right direction to somebody that can help you. That is huge, because they called you as the professional, right? I've did that thousands of times throughout my career. Hold on a second. I can't help you because this is not a law enforcement issue, but I know some people that can.
So say somebody calls into 911 and you send out law enforcement. You find out it is not within your realm to deal with that. But you've got this very upset person who called you, so you
can definitely direct them
someplace else.
Correct. And I'm going to tell you right now, we lack in that area as law enforcement. We do. It's the us, them attitude. Yep, it's not a law enforcement issue. Sorry, I can't help you. No, it's not a law enforcement issue, but
here's where you can go.
Here's where you can go, or it's not a law enforcement issue, but I'll make a few phone calls for you. Even though it's not falls in
your responsibility.
Not my responsibility, but you are a citizen of our community, and I want you to know that you called me to help you. And I'm going to do everything in my power to ensure that, A, your experience with us is good, and that I did do everything I could to help you. And next time you have a problem, you might not be so hesitant to call. And once again, we're going to build those relationships. It's not the uniform and badge anymore, right?
It's a citizen.
It's a citizen. When you instantly tell that person, you know what? It's not a law enforcement issue, they say, oh. But then you say, how I can help you by doing this. Guess what?
It's like neighbor to neighbor.
Neighbor to neighbor, exactly. And you're going to see that person out in the community, and they're going to say, hey, how's it going? You know, instead of Officer Walsh, hey, how's it going, Chad? It's going great. You know, because you're past that. You've taken down those barriers between you and them. That's very important.
I want to change a little bit of the direction we're talking. You and I were at an event not too long ago, and it was about foster care.
Yes.
I was, and she's now, the program is now up on the YouTube channel, and also it's being played here. I was not aware of the magnitude of children in situations where the police, they end up sitting, and like she started out saying, imagine yourself a 10-year-old child in a police car in the middle of the night, and you're scared, you don't know what's going to happen to you. So this foster care program is now available for these children, and they have places to put them that are safe for the night. Do you deal with that very often in your community?
You know, I'm going to say it's not just our community, it's all communities.
Right.
So with that being said, and I've been in a lot of communities, you know, I've been doing the law enforcement thing for a long time. I'm going to say this, nobody, and this is right back to getting the public involved in what we do, right? If you had a chance to ride along with me and we go to a domestic and both parents have to be separated and they have minor children, there are many a times that those children You sit with those children and you say, okay, we have no relative to take you to. It happens.
Yes.
Put yourself in the shoes of that officer. I have young children. I know what it feels like. And here's the other thing that people don't realize is a lot of times you go in these situations, and a lot of us officers have children, and you see the living conditions, and you see how they're being treated, and you know in your mind that you would never treat your children that way. But here you are, and with that program, I thought that program was great. And she even asked me if next year if I'd come up and speak and tell it from an officer's standpoint. And she's exactly right. You know, a lot of times that happens at 2, 3 in the morning. You know, both parties have been consuming some form of, you know, let's just use it as an example, alcoholic beverage. You know, they can't legally, you know, watch their children. What do you do? You know, and that program, I was like, that is amazing. That's why I went. That's why we donated to it. You know, it's...
And there's another tool.
It's a tool.
As a police officer, sheriff, can turn to put that child
Correct.
right away into a safe, loving environment so that that fear that they're sitting there controlling themselves with, which is, yeah, like she said, think about yourself as 10 years old and being in a situation like this. That child must be very fearful and very scared, not knowing what is going to happen to you. So now you have
Right.
this tool in the community where you can call that foster care hotline number and get somebody to take care of that child until
Correct.
the next day when they have to go into a court situation or whatever.
And, you know, law enforcement, they should be involved in that stuff. Because when you take that child, what's the last person they see? The person in the uniform, right?
Right.
Now we have molded them into that. Oh my gosh, the police are at my house, they're taking me away. That's the thought process, right? Can we change that thought process? We can. You know, and I've explained to many children, this is just a temporary situation. You know, and there's also been some children that have said to me, I don't want to go back. And that's heart-wrenching. It really is. You know,
Yeah, and the moment
it tugs at, if you're any kind of human being, it instantly tugs at your heartstrings.
Well, and that emotional dilemma that child is in, totally not understanding why are they in this situation?
Right.
Why are their parents not loving
responsible.
them and being responsible to them? Yeah, I can understand that stigma about a police officer, where in this situation, this foster care non-uniform person will come along and hug them and hold them and assure them that things will be okay and this is temporary, so forth.
Yep.
But you are now able to call that organization. You have a contact there. to call
Correct.
that
That's a tool for
organization.
us.
Exactly.
And that's a great tool. When I heard about that, I was like, we really need that. We need that in every community in America. We need good people that will stand up and say, you know, at 2 in the morning, I will take that child. I will show them love. I will bring them into my house. I will give them food. I will show them what it's like. Yep. And the last person they don't need to see is the law enforcement officer, because that really puts that at a disadvantage for us. And all of a sudden now we're the bad guys, right?
Yeah.
That's how it looks, you know. And that's not what we want to be teaching our children at all. And we want our children to know that, you know, yes, law enforcement's out there to do law enforcement. We are. But we're also out there as citizens in the community. We're just like you. We really are.
What kind of experiences, you don't have to elaborate, have you been in, like say, in South Dakota when you first started out? Were you in any type of real tense, emotional types of law enforcement activity that
Well, throughout your career, you're going to be in several different situations. Sometimes it's daily. Sometimes it is daily. You deal with right down to the domestic. You know, them are always heart-wrenching to go to those. To, I've been to murder scenes. I can recall I was 18 years old, a young soldier in the U.S. Army. I was stationed at Fort Polk, Louisiana. We had a murder right on Fort Polk. And we were one of the responding officers, me and my partner. You know, you're 18 years old, that stuff sticks with you for life.
And you're not exactly seasoned yet,
Not at all.
so it's easy to be uptight.
It's very easy to be uptight.
Even fearful. I mean, we all have those emotions. That's all part of our human nature
Yes.
that God has given to us. So, okay, explain how you dealt with that then.
It was, at first you try to be that big person where it doesn't affect you. Then you realize you're a human being. And when you leave that scene, it may take 24 hours, it may take 48 hours, but even to this day, I can tell you exactly what the air was like. Because that's things that stick into your brain forever. You know, I will tell you another one I went to, and I'm not painting the military as a bad place to be, but law enforcement, you got military law enforcement, civilian law enforcement. Things happen on a military installation just like they do out in the public. You know, I've been to many fatalities, especially with accidents that have involved drunk drivers. I can recall one of my sergeants walking out of a house after a drunk driver had drove through the front of a house into a child's room, carrying out a 2-year-old baby that wasn't breathing. So, I mean, that stuff sticks with you for life. It never goes away. And this is right back to the public don't get to see that, right? You're home in your bed, you're doing what you're doing, you're not seeing what that professional is seeing out in the public. And should you be? You should be. Because then you will have a different understanding for that job. And yeah, they show it on TV, right? They only show you what they want you to see. But if we invited you along and said, come ride with us, come be part of what we do, and we did this on a regular basis, people would really get an eye-opener as to what law enforcement really sees. What kind of effect does it have on us? It's going to have the same effect on you.
And this is where I was going with my question. Okay, so the effect it had on you might be different than, say, another person. And that other person might then deal with the next situation, which is similar, with a more calloused, perhaps, over anxiety attitude. So then they react rather than, like, I'm understanding you, is to, what you've said is you take it in stride because you've taken on this position, this is what
Correct.
you want to be
Yes.
in. But some police officers overreact, and then we get these situations where we then have big media coming down on the heads of the police officers and everything else. Do you know what I'm going with?
Here's
this?
what you have. You have the person that's been there, let's use a number, 5 years, right? They've seen it all, they did it all, and they're callous, they don't care, they don't have feelings for what's going on. That's a lie. They've never been in that situation. After it's all said and done, nobody's ever come up to them and said, are you doing okay? No, you're expected to handle this because you're wearing that uniform, and I don't care about how you feel about it. That's the wrong way to deal with it. But if we sit that person down and we say, hey, you know, you just came from a bad scene. Let's talk about this. You're a human just like everybody else. Don't tell me you're not.
Do
Don't,
they do that?
in a lot of situations, the big answer is no, because you're the professional, right? But we
Okay.
offer those services, and it's up to you to ask for that assistance as an officer. And I think that's totally wrong. Your department, if you get involved in any one of those situations, once again, you're a citizen, you're a human being. Your department needs to sit down with you and say, hey, we're here for you. Don't be the big person. Come to us. Tell us how you feel. You know, we understand. We've been there. Not only that, but, you know, the public also should know that too, because guess what? Now they see you as who? Not as the person wearing the uniform, the badge, and the gun, but now you're a citizen and a human being.
Neighbor.
A neighbor. Once again, we're back to that. We're removing that barrier between us and them. And there's nothing wrong with that. There is nothing wrong with asking or the department saying, we want to help you. We don't want you to take this on all by yourself.
Because the more you take it on, the more buildup of the tension and the anxiety and the reasons for why I react and that
Yep.
just goes a long way for a camaraderie and companionship and understanding of that person, and especially something that they were involved in is really eating at them, and they need somebody to talk to them and walk them through a way of dealing with it.
You know, and I will say this, I was 18 years old. I went to a murder scene. And yes, I was this strong military, could go into combat and handle anything, right? But when it was all said and done, my sergeant said, hey, we're going to have a talk. I said, talk about what? We're going to talk, we're going to sit down, we're going to have this chat. We might have many. And I said, why? Because if we don't talk about it, it's just going to continually build up and build up and build up. And pretty soon, you'll go to these scenes, and them aren't people lying there. They're just objects. We don't want that. That's not you. That's not us.
Seems to me that you had a very wise, intelligent, compassionate, and understanding teacher.
Well, the military was very strict at first. I realized that. But as an MP, we dealt with things differently than the rest of the military. You're trained. Yes, we also know that everybody's trained at the same level as you, and they can hurt you just like you can. You learn to talk. You learn to be compassionate. You learn how to treat people well. And you understand that, this person just got back from combat. They're not 100% yet. So don't go in there with your guns blazing. Don't go in there treating them like they're bad people. And we need to learn that as law enforcement officers. And not only that, but you have a good support program in the backside, which starts at the top. If you get into that bad situation, that sheriff should be calling that officer saying, are you okay? Let's go for coffee. Let's have lunch. There's nothing wrong with that. You're a human being just like me, right? Let's talk about it. Get it off your chest. Tell me what you think. And this might happen over a period of time, right? Not just one time, but maybe this needs to happen 10 times. Maybe you need to tell your story to the community. Because guess what? Now you're a citizen like them, and they know you have feelings.
Well, we only have just a few minutes left, Chad. The election is coming up in 2022, is that correct?
Yes.
So, in the meantime, what are you doing to reach out to the community, just briefly?
I am all over every community the best I can. I make phone calls. I'm out daily talking to folks all over St. Louis County, just like I would be if I was sheriff.
Civic clubs, are you getting an opportunity to get into some of those?
I would like to get into some more of those, like the Rotary clubs and all that stuff, yes. We're working hard to be able to go out and talk to everybody we can talk to. There are 199,000 citizens in St. Louis County, and I believe as a sheriff, you represent all those folks.
And you've got a big county.
You do. You represent all those folks, and you should meet those folks because they're relying on you. Whether they have their own police department or not, at the end of the day, they're going to look to their local sheriff for that support. For that, I know Chad Walsh. I know he wouldn't do that. Or I know Chad Walsh. I can give him a call and ask him a question. The local sheriff. That's important.
Well, I really thank you for coming in. I've learned a lot about the potential position that that you're going after. I'm amazed, and I've had some relationships with this county because the business we own is in Rice Lake City now, but it was, it was a township, and
Right,
so
yeah.
that's controlled by the sheriff's department. And I never realized the magnitude of what could be done to make that image of police officers in general, not just the sheriff's department, more friendly to the community. And I think your approach, it would be a welcome change in this community.
We need the change. We do. I do. You do. All of these citizens of St. Louis County need this change. It's time that we break down that barrier. And if it takes a new generation like me, not somebody that's been there 25 years and, this is how we've always done it, we need to get away from that.
Well,
We
thank you
need
so
to open
much for
those
coming
doors.
in today.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Yes. Thanks for having me.